The first thing you need to understand is that the moment I pulled my moving truck into the driveway of my brand new home, I knew I had just declared war without even saying a word. Not because of anything I had done, but because of where this house was located. It sat right next door to an HOA-controlled neighborhood, but the beauty was, my house wasn't part of their HOA. That meant no ridiculous monthly dues, no arbitrary fines, no rulebook dictating what color I could paint my shutters or how tall my grass could grow. Freedom. Pure, unrestricted homeowner freedom. But for some people, especially those who thrive on control, freedom is their worst nightmare. And one of those people happened to live directly across the street from me. Everyone in the neighborhood already had a nickname for her, HOA Karen. Clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses like she was auditioning for some bad reality show, and a voice that carried like a loudspeaker, she was the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA. The problem was, her power ended at the invisible line that excluded my house. Unfortunately, she hadn't realized that yet. The second my tires stopped rolling, she was marching across my lawn as if she owned it. I hadn't even opened the truck door before she was tapping on the window with her perfectly manicured nails, the expression on her face like she was about to issue a speeding ticket. I rolled down the window and offered what I thought was a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" I asked. She didn't waste a second. "Yes, you can help by registering with the HOA immediately. You'll need to submit your landscaping plans, paint samples for the exterior, parking details, and of course, pay your first month of dues. $400. She said it the way a bank teller asks for a check, like it was routine, mandatory, non-negotiable. I chuckled, not out of disrespect, but because she clearly didn't understand. "Actually," I said calmly, "this house isn't part of your HOA. It was intentionally excluded when the neighborhood was developed. So, I won't be needing to register or pay dues." The way her face twisted, you would have thought I had just spoken a foreign language. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she leaned closer, squinting at me like she was inspecting for lies. "That's impossible," she snapped. "Every home in this community falls under HOA jurisdiction. There are no exceptions. You can't just buy here and ignore the rules." I leaned back, still smiling. "Check your own documents. My house isn't on your map. I've got the deed to prove it." For a split second, silence hung in the air. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she realized she wasn't getting the immediate obedience she was used to. Then her tone changed from false politeness to straight-up hostility. "Well, we'll see about that," she hissed. "Nobody moves into this neighborhood and refuses the HOA. If you think you're some special case, you're going to regret it." And with that, she spun on her heel and marched back across the street, muttering to herself about fines, rules, and compliance. I climbed out of my truck, grabbed my first box, and headed inside, thinking that would be the end of it. A simple misunderstanding, right? She'd look at her HOA documents, realize the truth, and we'd all move on. But oh, how wrong I was. That night, as I unpacked, I couldn't help but glance out the window every now and then. And sure enough, every time I did, I saw her blinds twitching. She was watching. Inspecting. Waiting for me to make a mistake she could pounce on. At one point, I even saw her walking the edge of my lawn with a flashlight, as if measuring where my grass ended and hers began. It would have been funny if it wasn't so unsettling. By morning, things escalated. I stepped outside to grab the mail and found a bright yellow flyer taped to my door. It read in bold, all caps, "Welcome to the community, HOA rules and regulations." It listed everything from acceptable mailbox styles to the banned colors for garage doors. At the bottom, in handwriting that could only belong to her, was a note: "You are expected to comply immediately. Contact me for payment details." I actually laughed out loud. This was beyond ridiculous. My property had never been part of their HOA, and here she was trying to rope me into it by sheer intimidation. I crumpled the flyer and tossed it in the trash, but I knew deep down this was just the beginning. That afternoon, as I unloaded more boxes, she returned, this time with 2 other HOA board members trailing behind her like backup dancers. They stood at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, looking like they were about to conduct an interrogation. "We're here to inspect the property," Karen announced. "Standard procedure." "Inspection?" I repeated, genuinely baffled. "For what?" "For compliance," she said matter-of-factly. "We need to approve your exterior paint, fencing, lawn care plans." I cut her off with a shake of my head. "No. You don't. This house isn't under your HOA. You have zero authority here. If you step 1 foot onto my property, you're trespassing." The men behind her exchanged awkward glances, clearly less eager than she was to push this issue. One even muttered, "Karen, maybe he's right. I don't remember this lot being included." Karen's head snapped toward him, her eyes practically shooting fire. "Of course it's included. It's part of the neighborhood, isn't it?" Then she turned back to me, her voice dripping with venom. "You may think you're clever, but I'll have the board review this. We'll get legal involved if we have to." I couldn't help but grin. "Go ahead. I'll be waiting." With that, I carried my box inside, leaving them fuming on the driveway. That evening, I sat in my living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, sipping coffee, and replaying the day's drama in my mind. Most people move into a new home and worry about furniture placement, internet setup, or maybe meeting friendly neighbors. Me? I had apparently signed up for a personal feud with the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. And though I didn't know it yet, she wasn't just going to stop at angry words or empty threats. No, Karen was about to take this battle to a whole new level, one that would test just how much freedom a homeowner could truly enjoy when faced with someone who simply couldn't stand not being in control. And trust me, this was only the beginning. The very next morning, I discovered that Karen wasn't the type of person to lick her wounds and move on. No, she woke up early, armed with fresh determination and an even bigger dose of delusion. I hadn't even poured my first cup of coffee when I heard the sound of metal pounding against the earth outside. Curious, I opened my blinds and nearly spit out my drink. There she was in my front yard, hammering a bright red sign into the grass like she was staking her claim on a gold mine. The sign read in bold block letters, HOA Notice, Non-Compliant Property. My first reaction was disbelief, then laughter. Who does that? Who wakes up and decides it's perfectly fine to put a giant warning sign on a neighbor's lawn that they don't even control? I walked outside, still holding my mug, and called out, "Karen, what on earth do you think you're doing?" She stood back to admire her handiwork, hammer in one hand, smug grin plastered across her face. "I told you yesterday, you can't just move in here without following the HOA rules. Consider this your first official notice. You've got until Friday to pay your dues and submit your compliance forms." She crossed her arms like a sheriff laying down the law. I shook my head slowly, trying to keep my cool. "Karen, this isn't funny anymore. You're trespassing on my property. You have no authority here, no matter how many signs you plant. I'm asking you to take that down and leave." Her smile faltered but only for a second. "If you don't comply, we'll fine you $200 for every day you're in violation. And if you refuse to pay, we'll place a lien on your house. It's all in our bylaws." That's when I put my coffee down on the porch railing and pulled out my trump card. I had anticipated she might try something like this, so I had copies of my property deed and boundary survey ready to go. I held them up and said, "Actually, your bylaws don't apply to me. This house was never annexed into your HOA. It's completely independent, and here's the legal proof. You can't fine me. You can't lien me. And you certainly can't hammer junk into my lawn." For the first time, I saw genuine doubt flicker in her eyes. She snatched the sign out of the ground and clutched it to her chest like a shield. "We'll see about that," she hissed before stomping back across the street. I thought maybe that would be enough to end the nonsense, but no. Over the next week, Karen turned her obsession into a full-time job. On Monday, I got a typed letter slipped under my door accusing me of unauthorized exterior paint color. The kicker? I hadn't even painted anything yet. The house was still exactly as the previous owners had left it. On Tuesday, another letter arrived demanding I pay back dues for the 6 months prior to my purchase. On Wednesday, I caught her standing in my driveway, taking pictures of my car. When I stepped outside and asked what she was doing, she announced proudly, "Your vehicle isn't registered with the HOA. It's subject to towing." I burst out laughing. "Karen, you seriously think you can tow my car from my own driveway?" Her answer, "If it's in violation, yes." That's when I leaned forward and said slowly, so she wouldn't miss a word, "Karen, this house is not in your HOA. You have no power here. None. You are harassing me, and I will call the police if you set one foot onto my property again without permission." Her face turned crimson. She sputtered something about community standards and stormed off. By Thursday, I started documenting everything, every letter, every photo, every incident. I wanted a paper trail in case things got ugly, and deep down, I knew they would. I had dealt with stubborn people before, but Karen was on a whole other level. She wasn't just stubborn, she was addicted to control. My existence as a free homeowner right next to her HOA was like a thorn in her side she couldn't pull out. Friday evening, the situation reached its boiling point. I was grilling burgers in the backyard when I heard sirens. Moments later, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of my house. My stomach dropped. I hadn't called them, so who did? The answer became clear when Karen strutted out from behind the officers, arms folded, smug as ever. "Sir," one of the officers began, approaching me with a cautious look, "we received a complaint that you're refusing to follow HOA regulations and may be in violation of community ordinances." I raised an eyebrow and set down my spatula. "Officers, I'm glad you're here. Because I've been dealing with constant harassment from this woman all week. She's trespassed on my property, posted fake notices, and now she's wasting police resources. This house isn't part of her HOA." The officer frowned. "Do you have proof of that?" Without missing a beat, I went inside and came back with my folder, the deed, the survey, everything I had prepared. I handed it over, and the officers took their time reviewing it. They exchanged glances, then one smirked and shook his head. "She didn't mention this," he muttered. Karen's smile cracked. "What are you talking about? Of course he's under the HOA. Everyone is. You can't just let him live here without rules. His lawn, his shutters, his car. It all ruins the neighborhood." The officer held up the papers like a gavel. "Ma'am, according to these documents, this property was never part of the HOA. That means your board has no jurisdiction here. You've been trespassing and issuing fraudulent notices. If this continues, you could be facing charges." I'll never forget the look on her face. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She turned to the officers, desperate. But that can't be right. Everyone has to follow the rules. That's how it works." The cop folded his arms and gave her a look that could cut glass. "What works is the law, ma'am. And the law says he owns his property free and clear. If we have to come back here again, we won't be so polite." Karen's face went from red to purple. She stomped her foot like a toddler and shouted, "This isn't fair. He'll ruin everything," before retreating back to her house in a flurry of slammed doors and shaking blinds. The officers turned back to me, shaking their heads. "Sorry about that, sir. Unfortunately, We get calls like this more often than you'd think. Some people just can't accept boundaries. I thanked them for their time and offered them each a burger, which they politely declined. As they pulled away, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. I had moved into what I thought would be a quiet home, and within a week, I'd already survived my first HOA showdown. But as I stood on my porch that night, I knew one thing for certain: Karen wasn't finished with me. Not by a long shot. She had tasted defeat, and people like her don't take defeat well. If anything, I had just fueled her obsession even more. And though I didn't know what her next move would be, I knew this battle was far from over. This was just round one. The cops leaving should have been the end of it. Any normal person would have felt embarrassed after being told, in front of the entire neighborhood, that they had no authority over their neighbor's property. But Karen was not a normal person. If anything, the warning from the police just made her double down. For a few days, things seemed quiet. She avoided eye contact, stayed indoors, and didn't march across my lawn demanding compliance. I thought maybe she'd finally accepted reality. But then I started noticing little things, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore once I paid attention. My mailbox was mysteriously dented one morning, though I'd checked it the night before and it was perfectly fine. A bag of trash had been accidentally left at the edge of my driveway. Twice I found tire tracks across the strip of grass by the road, as if someone had intentionally swerved onto my lawn. None of it could be proven, but I didn't need a detective to guess who was behind it. Karen couldn't use rules to control me anymore, so now she was trying intimidation. I decided not to engage. The more she realized I wasn't rattled, the angrier she got. And that's when things took another wild turn. One Saturday morning, I was out back mowing my lawn when I heard a group of voices at the fence line. I cut the mower and walked over to find 3 of my other neighbors, people I hadn't officially met yet, standing there with sympathetic smiles. One of them, a middle-aged man named Rick, spoke first. "We heard about what happened with Karen and the cops. Word travels fast around here." I laughed and said, "Yeah, I figured it might." Rick shook his head. "Honestly, good for you. Nobody's ever stood up to her like that before. We're all sick of the HOA, but most of us feel trapped. You're the first one to tell her no, and get away with it." That conversation opened the floodgates. Over the next week, more and more neighbors started stopping by to chat. They all had the same story: fines for silly things, threats of liens, constant harassment over minor violations. Karen wasn't just a nuisance to me, she was the face of everything they hated about the HOA. To them, I wasn't just a neighbor, I was a symbol of freedom. And they wanted to know how I'd pulled it off. I showed them my deed, explained how my house had never been annexed into the HOA when the development was built, and told them the police had confirmed it. Their eyes lit up. One woman whispered, "If only we could get out of it too." Karen must have sensed her grip slipping, because that same week, she staged her boldest stunt yet. I came home one afternoon to find a group of HOA board members standing in front of my house. Karen was at the center, waving a folder of papers like she was Moses delivering commandments. "We've had an emergency meeting," she announced. "And we've voted to formally annex your property into the HOA. Effective immediately." I actually laughed out loud. "Karen, you can't just vote my property into your HOA. That's not how property law works." She shoved the folder toward me, papers spilling out. "It's all here. Unanimous vote, signed by the board." I didn't even bother taking the papers. "You're wasting ink. You can vote all you want, but you can't change my deed. That's a legal document filed with the county. You have zero authority to annex me. You're just playing pretend." Her face turned purple. The other board members looked less confident, shuffling awkwardly as if they already knew she was bluffing. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the scene, and said, keep this up and I'll show the police how you're forging documents and harassing me. Do you really want fraud charges on your record? The board members scattered like pigeons. Karen stood her ground, but her fury was practically shaking her. You'll regret this, she spat before storming off. I thought the theatrics were over, but Karen had one last card to play. 2 nights later, I came home to flashing lights, police cars parked in front of her house. I watched as officers escorted a furious Karen out in handcuffs. Turns out she had actually tried filing those fake annexation papers with the county clerk. They caught the forgery instantly, and the sheriff's office was called. She was booked for attempted fraud and harassment. The entire neighborhood stood on their porches, whispering as she was taken away. It was surreal. The woman who once strutted around like a queen had just been dethroned in the most public way possible. After that, everything changed. Without Karen's iron grip, the HOA board fell apart. People started openly questioning fees, challenging fines, and demanding accountability. Rick even joked that I had started a revolution just by moving in. And in a way, he wasn't wrong. I hadn't planned to become anyone's hero, but standing up to Karen gave others the courage to push back too. As for me, I enjoyed the peace I had fought for. No more fake notices, no more cops knocking on my door, no more trespassing at dawn. I mowed my lawn the way I liked, parked my truck in the driveway without a sticker, and even painted my shutters a bold color just to prove I could. Every time I looked across the street at Karen's now quiet house, blinds drawn, car gone for weeks at a time, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. She had lost, not just against me, but against the entire neighborhood. And here's the thing I'll never forget, bullies like Karen thrive on fear and compliance. The second someone refuses to play their game, their power crumbles. She thought she could control me with threats, fines, and intimidation. But in the end, her obsession destroyed her reputation, her position, and even her freedom. So, when people ask me what it's like living next door to an HOA Karen, I tell them this: it's like moving next to a storm. At first, it's loud, chaotic, and scary. But if you stand your ground and wait it out, eventually the storm burns itself out, and what's left is peace, freedom, and the knowledge that you didn't let anyone take away your rights. And every time I sit on my porch now, sipping coffee in the quiet morning sun, I can't help but smile. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, bothers a power-hungry HOA Karen more than realizing she has no power over you at all.